Please join us in welcoming Sun Country Airlines CEO Jude Bricker in discussion with Skift Airlines reporter Meghna Maharishi.
Welcome, Jude. It's nice to have you back here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this might come as a surprise to some people in the audience, but in 2023, the most profitable airline in the U.S. was Sun Country. It was not Delta. And lately, I feel like Sun Country has caught a lot of attention from investors and the airline industry in general. And it also seems as if Sun Country's been able to escape a lot of the headwinds that have plagued some of the other ultra-low-cost carriers in the past couple of years. So I'm wondering, what's your secret? How has Sun Country been able to be so profitable?
We're just better.
Just better?
So some of it's luck. So Minneapolis didn't have the kind of capacity pressure in 2023 that's a great chart. Didn't know that's awesome. Worst to best. We came through COVID in a much stronger position because we had a cargo market. So we actually produced in 2020 positive EBITDAR, which is, sort of maybe the only airline that I know of. And so we just kind of came through COVID with a lot more tailwind. We also were the first to get our pilot contract done. So what happened post-COVID is a lot of the labor rates reset to a lot higher level. We did our contract late 2020 into 21. And so we had a lot, the rest of the airlines started doing their labor contracts after us. And so we were kind of the first into the breach, and that kind of paid off as we moved into 23. And so, there was just a lot of benefits for us, but I want to point out the structural advantage we have is that we don't have an obligation to fly an airplane. So the business model was basically, how do you make an enduring model in airlines? You make it so that you don't have to fly and still be solvent. In order to do that, you take your fixed costs and make them really low to zero. That's impossible. Or you find other things to do, particularly in off-peak times, and that's what we did. We have a cargo segment in our operation, and we have a significant charter operation, and those two together really help stabilize the variability that we experience in sched service as a leisure carrier, but then also they're enduring through challenging economic times, which is what we proved out.
Yeah, I definitely want to touch on Minneapolis.
Sure.
And your aircraft. And just for the audience, you've heard this a ton of times today, but if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Stova app, and we will get to them at the end of the session. So in a story that was published in the Twin Cities Business Journal a few weeks ago, you said the public perception on ancillaries has changed. People are taking that more into account when they're booking flights now.
Yep.
How is Sun Country adapting to that perception for its commercial services?
Yeah, so that was in the context of kind of why this kind of pervasive discussion came up in the last panel. I saw it in a few of the other panels, why are the ULCCs struggling from a profitability perspective? Keep in mind we're more profitable than any other carrier in the U.S., so it hasn't really affected us. And so some of the commentary is about hey, ancillary product was kind of this, and I was at Allegiant, and we were kind of leading the charge into ancillary in the aughts and the teens. And so I think what happened is that now buyers incorporate in their fair purchase decisions what they would expect to have to pay in ancillary. And I think, quite frankly, the leisure carriers got a little greedy in over-yielding these ancillary products, and it became a detriment to the fare of outside. So in other words, they got to the point where they were evaluating the success of an ancillary product by its take rate times its price. And you got to this situation where we raised the price, that value becomes more and more, and they weren't really incorporating what was happening on the airfare. And so I think that the fare discount that ULCCs and a head-to-head with the network carrier had to charge became expansive, and you just got it got a little out of hand. And it's very difficult to walk that back because it's customer perception. So if you lowered your bag prices, for example, you wouldn't be able to pick up the airfare. And the contrary, though, is true. And that's why I think you've seen Spirit and Frontier move to like a bundled marketing position on their website, which is similar to kind of Delta and American, quite frankly. But at Sun Country, we never really over-yielded. So it was really about charging a value that was, respective of the amount of product you're offering. The price should be worth it. And so, I don't think we had that problem. A la carte works. We want people to be able to design their booking in such a way that they get value where they spend it. And, so a la carte is a great way to do it. We've evolved in merchandising. I've had my own personal road to Damascus related to ancillary products. I just think we have a good mix. There's some tweaks we need to make. I think certainly, so we have a product called Change Free Waiver, which is basically a refundable fare. We also have a non-refundable fare. You can do both. By the way, Delta has the same thing. You just see it on the front page with basic economy and their normal products. So, I think the way we merchandise needs to evolve, and we can continue to tweak and be better there. But I don't think ancillary is dead. It just needs to be an appropriate value proposition to the consumer.
And given some of those headwinds and that perception on ancillaries, do you think that there is room to reassess the current state of the ultra low cost business model?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, just to kind of toss my view in this already crowded space of like what's wrong with ULCCs. The network carriers are just much better at competing with us than they've ever been, and that's because they've been able to segment the cabin. I think it's a lapping of the loyalty program. So when they merged, a loyalty program with a credit card is typically 7 years. So in their second round, so they're just now getting to where they're kind of monetizing the value of their scale in loyalty. And then, look, let's be honest, CARES had an outweighed benefit to the larger carriers with the highest payrolls. That's how the money was distributed. So I think coming out of COVID, they were just in a naturally better position. There's some negatives on the ULCC side. I think a lot of ULCCs had depended on growth to keep their costs low, both in the sense that they had a maintenance honeymoon that they were experiencing, which was going to expire. Gains on sale leasebacks, which is kind of a hot topic issue today. Treated as a contra expense, juniorization of crews because you continue to grow and add junior crews so that your rates can be similar, but still you have a much junior pay group, so your rates on aggregate are less. And so I think once growth kind of, was halted through COVID, a lot of those advantages, which were temporary, came to the surface. And so, my view is the problems that the high utilization carriers like Spirit and Frontier are having isn't really about where they fly. It's really just they're flying at the wrong times, and this is consistent with the commentary that the CEOs of those airlines have talked about in their earnings calls. Is that the market is really crowded on Tuesdays and Septembers, and our response to that is to not fly. Their response is to lower the airfare. Well, when in a rising cost environment, that strategy doesn't work.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like another feather in Sun Country's cap is its fleet. You rely a lot on the 737s. Can you tell me a little bit more about your aircraft and how you've been able to avoid some of the issues that we've been seeing with other airlines having with Boeing or with Airbus and their geared turbofan engines? Yeah,
this is another situation of me just being lucky, not good necessarily. I got to Sun Country in 2017. We had an all-NG fleet, 700s, 800s. I got rid of the 700s. Today we're an all-800 fleet, 71 airplanes. We have some 900s, but they're leased out currently. But it's an all-NG fleet. And quite frankly, if the price was good for a MAX, I would have done it. But we could never get the value proposition relative to the opportunity cost of an NG to transition into that type. But it wasn't me looking at it and saying there's going to be technical problems or production problems or anything like that. So now we sit here today, having been very aggressive at buying a bunch of equipment through COVID. we don't have to do any engine overhauls because we can tear down engines. All our airplanes are in operation somewhere. They're going to be redelivered into our fleet for growth in the next 2 years. So we don't have any delivery concerns. The fleet is incredibly reliable. The 737-800 is a fantastic piece of equipment. The CFM56-7 is a great engine. So we don't have the reliability of an aging airplane challenge, So we're just in a really great place. And I think our fleet positioning is a differentiation of strength, now. Like, a lot of carriers are talking about, buy our stock because we have this great order book. I would look at it the other way. It's like you have these challenges that we don't have. We can be very specific and prescriptive about our growth because we know where the airplanes are and when they're coming in, and we just don't have that added challenge to our operation.
So there are no considerations for making any big changes to the fleet?
No, so as I mentioned, there's 71 airplanes, but not all those are in service yet. So for the next 2 years, so planes are expensive right now, let's be honest. I'm glad I don't have to go and buy some in order to grow. So, for the next 2 years, we're just going to be taking on these airplanes that are either in our lease portfolio, not leasing in, but we own them and lease them out. So we'll take those on redelivery, put them in our operation, or they're in a cargo operation with Atlas. We're going to take them into our cargo operation here at Sun Country. So these planes are out there. There's, the growth is out there. We don't need to do anything that we don't already do. The MAX works in our operation, absolutely. It just is too expensive. 320 probably is the same. We could probably look at wide body. I'm sure I have a model that says that'd be something that we could employ, but it's just not the right time for us. So 737 NGs for the next 3 to 5 years, probably.
I guess it's the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah,
so.
A little bit of that, yeah.
Yeah, I just, again, want to remind the audience, if you have any questions for Jude, feel free to put them in the app. So I want to talk a little bit about Minneapolis.
Sure.
You have a pretty major competitor in Minneapolis, Delta Airlines. How have you managed to stay so competitive at the airport?
Oh man, my favorite thing said on stage today was Marty talking about his big negative margins in Minneapolis. I just love that. It's an inhospitable marketplace for everybody that isn't Delta or Sun Country. And the reason is we kind of say, okay, Delta is the largest carrier in the space. They have all the corporate contracts. Minneapolis, the Twin Cities has the highest prevalence of Fortune 500 headquarters per capita. That's our little claim to fame. So there's a lot of corporate traffic, and they do a really good job at that. One of the things that I did when I got to Sun Country is say we had a first-class product, and I was like, look, it's just not, we need to fight where we can win. We pulled the first class off, and now we have a premium economy, which is designed for leisure customers. And the reason that we work and other carriers don't, that aren't Delta, is that we fly when there's demand and don't when there isn't. And we redo the network specific to the Minneapolis travelers. So between Memorial Day and Labor Day, there's a tremendous amount of travel demand on the leisure and VFR side, visiting friends and relatives. So connecting big cities to Minneapolis is, it's a really good business. Back to school, that demand is gone. Our July operation on Sched service is about 3x our September operation. There's no airline that produces any kind of that variability. And that means it works for us. So when there's demand, we're in the market, and when there isn't, we're not. In the wintertime, everybody wants, in Minneapolis, it's cold. We all want to go to the south, so we have, we shut down a lot of the things that we do in the summer, redeploy that capacity into our north-south travel, Southern California, desert destinations like Vegas and Phoenix and Florida, Mexican, Caribbean markets, and those are really, really successful. So the network is really all about variability, and I think that the things that are working in the airline industry today are you're either gigantic, too big to fail. There's 4 airlines in the U.S. that fall into that category, or you deliver something no one else can replicate. That's our secret sauce, the variable capacity model.
Yeah, definitely. Last time you were here in 2022, you said you wanted to turn Minneapolis into a 2-airline market where for those who are using their own money to travel, they'll fly Sun Country. If you're flying on business, then you'll fly Delta. And I know back in 2022, Delta was also facing a lot of labor shortages, but in the time since, it's been able to rebuild its Minneapolis hub. Do you think Sun Country has been able to deliver on that goal?
Hell yeah, we checked that box. I mean, so today, point of origin travel out of the Twin Cities, we carry 50% of all non-Delta traffic. I think that's about, so they're about 60, we're 20, everybody else is 20. There's no leisure carrier, so if you put JetBlue and Alaska not in this category, there's no other leisure carrier that has that kind of share in a major market. So it's been great, and we, you know, I'm riding on the coattails of my predecessors that have already established a brand in the Twin Cities. Sun Country's been serving the Twin Cities for 40 years, so we're really well known. And so, you know, launching a new market is just, you know, multiples easier when you're an established brand and have the scale and the halo of a loyalty program, et cetera, because we can just launch it and it sells. You know, we don't, the last panel, they were talking about trying to build brand awareness. That isn't part of our calculus, at least in the Twin Cities. So yeah, I mean, we're about, you know, a little over 50% market share, point of origin in the Twin Cities. For 2025, we're taking on a tremendous amount of cargo growth. Block hours will grow about 10%, but most of those will be allocated into cargo, so our sched service will be relatively flat, which I feel pretty good about because we've seen fares throughout 2024 compress. You know, my diagnosis would be, all right, we got out of COVID, everybody traveled domestically because it opened up, so major markets, you know, remember like spring of 21 is kind of where we saw things really start rocketing. Then we all wanted to go Mexican, Caribbean, particularly these Mexico markets that opened up post-COVID. Then we all wanted to go across the Atlantic. And then so that cycle's kind of worn through, and then we started seeing a lot of capacity overlaying our network in Minneapolis for summer of 2024. Fares compressed. We made healthy margins, but not what we had hoped. And then now we're on the backside of that, and we've seen inflection in fares, and our own capacity outlay combined with that over our network gives me some real bullishness towards next year.
So on your point on cargo, I know Sun Country inked this partnership with Amazon a few years ago. Yep. And in your latest earnings call, you said cargo revenues have been up. Can you tell me a little bit more about that partnership with Amazon, and what was your reasoning for going into cargo?
We had a strategic problem, and I think most leisure carriers have the same problem. No one wants to fly in certain times of the year. So think about if you kind of histogram, sorry, let's say we rated it. I don't mean to get too technical, but like there's 100 awesome days. There's 100 crappy ones. There's 150 in the middle. And those middle days, depending on the inputs like fare and fuel price, work or don't. All right? But there's 100 layups. Super easy. Any moron can make money. Sunday after Thanksgiving, Christmas weekends, spring break, etc. Y'all figure it out. So there's 100 awesome days. So really it's about, you know, what do we do to grow those days without having to carry a bunch of overhead in those off-peak periods? The 100 awful days are just always going to be that way. We have 4 flights on a certain Tuesday in September, 4 of them. And so, you know, and like nothing I do, there's no like loyalty or like, you know, product that's going to be like, oh, wow, I should take a vacation and arrive in Vegas on a Tuesday night in September. That'll be awesome. That'll never happen. The only way to do it is to either reduce your fixed costs or to find other stuff to do with your assets. So we had this strategic problem. I got there in 2017, and I've realized, hey, I can cut costs. I can, you know, change the distribution strategy. I can rebrand the carrier toward leisure. We can do a lot here, but the ceiling's going to be mostly determined by how small we can make September, how we can survive those off-peaks. Not just September, there's, you know, early December, et cetera. And so cargo was an obvious solution. It's counter-seasonal, sort of shows up all times a year. And so we pursued a couple different partners in the cargo space, and it just all kind of came together with with an operator like Amazon, which really values operational reliability. You know, in the secret sauce category, we have this really varying schedule that I mentioned, but also we deliver great operational performance. And that isn't, I can't take credit for that. I mean, I got professionals that have been doing this for ages. And that's what Amazon most valued, and that's what we were able to deliver them. So it's been a great partnership, and that's kind of allowed us to grow the Sched service side so much bigger than it already is.
Yeah, I do want to start taking in some of the audience questions, and also if you have any last-minute questions for Jude, feel free to put them in the app. I guess just following up on Amazon, one audience member is asking, how do you see your relationship with Amazon evolving in the future?
Well, we did a deal, so we have 12 airplanes in service today. We did a deal a few months ago where that number is going to go from 12 to 20. And that'll kind of keep us busy for a while. As I mentioned, that's most of our growth in 2025. And the reason it's most of our growth is I just can't grow any faster. You know, we're talking about hiring pilots, training pilots, upgrading pilots. 10% is about what we can do in this environment. And so they're going to get the majority of that, and I'd like to absorb that and then kind of focus on the other lines of business and bring them up to proportional levels as we have today. So my hope is, you know, Amazon, we get to these 20 airplanes, we get the scale, the efficiencies of scale, and then we kind of let it run for a few years. You know, Amazon thinks about growth in a different scale as most of us in this room do. So, you know, I'd like to take them in doses. But yeah, I mean, it's been a great partnership. They're fantastic operators, great, very strenuous focus on operational performance. We're a better carrier because of them, not just because of the financial aspects and the balance to the operation, but also because they are very demanding, and I think that makes us better.
Yeah, it seems like a unique partnership that's paid off lately. I want to bring in another audience question. Can you tell us a little bit more about Sun Country's partnership with Caesars and how that plays into your commercial strategy moving forward?
Yeah, we think about our track charter businesses similar to our cargo businesses. So it's an aircraft that's dedicated to operate for a different operator with pass-through economics. We have 6 airplanes that are passenger airplanes that are in that situation. We have a VIP charter that flies back and forth, so 76 or so first-class seats. It flies back and forth between LAX and Kona. We have the Caesars arrangement with 3 airplanes dedicated with Beau Rivage. And so there's 6 airplanes in the track business. It's basically flat capacity, shows up every day of the year, has the same effect on our financials and our flexibility in Sched service as does our cargo operation. The bad news is most of those opportunities for, you know, they used to call them casino junkets. Most of those are spoken for. We do all of them. So I don't see a lot of growth in that space, but Caesar's been such a fantastic partner, and I'd like to be flying for them 20 years from now.
Yeah, this sounds good. I think we'll take in maybe a couple more audience questions.
Sure.
Here's another one. It says, Sun Country lost its essential air service market this year. It's only one. Are there any more on the horizon?
Yeah, that sucks. I mean, the Allegiant guys were so mad, and I've been growing these markets for my whole career, and then we got an EAS contract, and now everybody's piling into the space. I mean, look, here's what happened. Post-COVID, there wasn't any regional pilots. The regional capacity was really compressed. We're past that now. EAS for a mainline carrier like me isn't going to be a major thing because the communities that benefit from the EAS service want, you know, they want a connection to a legacy hub. And so I think it was an opportunity in time. Eau Claire was very happy with the service. That's in Wisconsin, if you don't know. And they've been great partners. And we did not only Eau Claire to Minneapolis, but also to Vegas and Orlando, and some of those markets might stay. But I think EAS for, you know, an 800 probably isn't going to be viable in the future because they want multiple frequencies connecting to a big hub. Most of the EAS markets won't be. But now we've seen like everybody competing for it. Everybody was like, wow, I need to get some EAS. But I think it was probably a moment in time.
So I guess that's not a focus for now.
No, I mean, there's 6 EAS markets in Minnesota that we, you know, don't have. We're going to be there at the table with all of them. but I'm just not that optimistic.
I think we got room for one last question,
Sure.
and this is something that I'm curious about. Are there any interesting travel trends that you're noticing for the year out of Minnesota, and what are you seeing for the holidays?
It's interesting, they came up at dinner last night. I was with Sean and a bunch of other airline CEOs. So there's a couple things. One is the secondary market as a destination, I think, is much more viable post-COVID. So Destin and Charlottesville, Savannah, Asheville, but secondary Florida, Tucson, a lot of those markets are just, kind of came on the map as a travel destination post-COVID, and I think they seem to be here to stay, which I think is really, really positive. There was a lot of talk about like bleisure. It was kind of a buzzword a couple years ago. I don't think that's a thing. Like, people going on vacation and maybe working while they're on vacation, that's a thing. But like people traveling in September, that's not a thing. So, I think that the future seems to be a lot like the past in regard to the days of week preference and seasonal preferences that people have for travel. I built a variable capacity airline. We were coming through COVID. I was like, COVID's going to change everything. Now the whole peaky thing's gone. I was genuinely concerned about it. No reason for concern. Everything's back to normal there. What we have seen is a little bit of flattening out. So Sean brought up that the CEO of the DFW airport, that there's been kind of a flattening of the Thanksgiving period, which is a really interesting phenomenon to me because in other words, the beginning of the Thanksgiving travel season has moved forward and it's spread out. Everybody wants to go home on Sunday, but they're more than happy to leave Friday even, before Thanksgiving and kind of over the weekend. So we've seen this broad-based, like a flattening of the demand, which has been really, really positive. But yeah, generally, I think that people travel a lot like they always have.
Yeah, interesting, and I guess no bleisure travel. So,
Yeah.
Jude Bricker, everyone, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.